Thank you all for being here tonight. It's a very special night, and we are really excited to host this program. For those who don't know, Valerie presented she presented a local history talk for us last year based on her Black Heritage Trail tour. And the event sparked an idea about bringing people, specifically women, together to share stories of inspiration. And she actually did something with that idea and turned it into tonight's program. So we're here tonight to celebrate Women's History Month. It's a time when we acknowledge, honor, and educate ourselves and others on the many contributions women have made to society. Despite the thousands of years of human history, a month to celebrate women in America has only existed formally since 1980, when President Jimmy Carter declared the week of March 8th to be National Women's History Week. Congress eventually turned it into a full month in 1987. And we are really grateful to have 4 inspiring women here tonight. Valerie, Susan, Sandi, and Priscilla have led the charge and will share their stories of women who have somehow shaped their lives. We hope it inspires you to do the same. And so let's get started, and I will introduce you to your host for the evening. Valerie Fagin is a Black Heritage Trail of New Hampshire tour guide and advocate for racial and social justice. A self-care fitness enthusiast who enjoys leading aqua fitness classes and assisting at the Kripalu Center for Yoga and Health. An original member of Ballet Hispanico of New York, Valerie believes everyone has creativity and a story to share.
A very warm welcome to each and every one of you. Wow, there's a lot you could have done tonight, and I appreciate you coming out to celebrate Women's History Month. So I am one of the co-creators. The other one was Sue Hess, and you can stand up a moment. She and I created the presenters. So on our flyer, we put a quote by Katie Hodges: "Behind every woman is another great woman." So this is what I say. I'm going to add to that quote: behind, in front, in back, and to the sides of the woman is great women holding her up. So we are a real team here, and I want to introduce you to the team. So again, my name is Valerie, for those who don't know me, and my pronouns are she and her. And I've been in Portsmouth over 35 years now. I am in Rye. And like Katie said, I was asked last year to be a speaker. And I've never, ever done anything for Women's History Month. So when I did it last year, I was really inspired and made a commitment that every year in the month of March that I was going to do something special. So this is how this got created. So I'd like to introduce the other team members. So Sue Hess, come on up, stand up. Yeah. He's going to be speaking about Charlotte Salomon today. And then Priscilla French is going to be speaking about Blanche Ames. And Sandi Clark is going to be talking about Fanny Lou Hamer. I want to thank these 3 women because they are professionals, they are creative, talented, and they are community builders. And they took their time from their busy schedules to really research and explore 3 women that really influenced their lives. So before we start, I want to just open up with some words. And women have shaped every facet of society, breaking barriers in science, activism, leadership, and innovation. Yet their stories have often been sidelined. Today, let's recognize the remarkable achievements, resilience, and perseverance of some of these women. Let's honor the past while working towards a future where every woman's voice is heard, valued, and celebrated. Okay. Thank you. So we're going to bring up the first presenter, Susan Hess. Come on up. And one thing that I did mention about these 3 women, they are dear to my heart. Really great friends, and I have deep connections with them, so I love them dearly.
Thank you, Val.
Oh, first of all, sorry, I'm going to talk about Sue, so you're right there. No, yeah. Okay, Susan Hess is a marketing professional with a passion for creating strong branding, strategic messaging, and compelling organizational narratives. She is also an art practitioner, captivated by bold colors and expressive statements, all art forms, from painting and drawing to textile design. She was also a Seacoast Family Promise board member. Today, she will tell the story of a fiercely courageous artist named Charlotte Salomon.
Thank you, Val, and thank you to all of you for coming to hear our stories tonight. 25 years ago, I first encountered the work of Charlotte Salomon, a German Jewish artist whose life and the very unique way that she told it left a lasting impression on me. And I'm excited to share that story with you tonight. The trauma that she portrays can be and is, I think, very upsetting in a lot of her artwork. But I hope the thought that you'll carry with you is that she faced it so bravely. She plows through it, in fact, and makes a conscious decision to live and tell her story. I first came across her work when I was taking a class at the School of the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. Our teacher walked us across the street to the museum to see an exhibit of paintings that Charlotte had done to tell this life story. I hadn't heard of her. I didn't know what to expect. Don't remember the class I took, but I do remember Charlotte Salomon. I walked into the exhibit to see her life story unfold chronologically in hundreds of gouache paintings, like it does at this exhibit that was held at a German museum a few years ago. Many of the paintings have text written directly on them, and some have transparent overlays where she has written text, of course, all in German, and she's made musical references and philosophical references. And then you can lift up this sheet and see this beautiful artwork. She called this work Life or Theater and described it as a song play or an operetta. The question marks in the title leave it up to us, the viewers, to decide if it is in fact real life or if it is a dramatic interpretation or both. This is the very last painting in the series. It's the summer of 1942, and Charlotte is sitting by the Mediterranean Sea in her green bathing suit. She has a paintbrush in her hand, and she has just completed this epic work, this epic story of her life. It took her nearly 2 years, averaging about 3 paintings a day. She gave it then to a doctor friend for safekeeping. What I love about this and all of her work is that in just a few brush strokes, she captures the gesture in the scene. And for those who paint or are interested, the term gesture refers to conveying a very essential movement or feeling with just a few quick flowing lines. And she just does that so beautifully. 6 months later, Charlotte Salomon was arrested and murdered when she arrived at the concentration camp at Auschwitz. And she was 5 months pregnant at the time. I wanted to figure out a way to really show you the scope of what Charlotte did it was actually a year and a half that she did this work. So I took snips of all the paintings and sized them to fit on this one slide. She painted 768 10 by 13 inch paintings. And apparently I read if you laid them side by side, they would equal 3 New York City blocks. Because it's a musical stage performance, she has different sections. The first section that kind of came up first is the prelude, and that covers her early life and childhood in the 1930s. Then the main section is all about her adulthood when she is in hiding in the south of France. There's an epilogue that has more about life with her grandparents, and then there's several descriptive letters. And then all of the paintings on the lower right corner were unnumbered, and those didn't make it into the work. So really over 1,000 paintings in all. This is just an example of one of those little grids so that you can see how much went into each and every painting. To put things in context, she was born in 1917 in Berlin. But her story, Life for Theater, starts well before she was born. The people she was closest to are the main characters in this song play. And she's given everyone names that fit some aspect of their character. So Albert Salomon is named, her father is named Albert Kahn. In German, that means to be able or be capable. And he was a very capable surgeon. In fact, he's recognized for developing the first procedure to use X-rays in order to diagnose breast cancer. She then names her maternal grandparents, Grandma and Grandpa Nar, in the lower right corner. Nar means creaky in German. Charlotte was very close to them, especially after her mother, Francisca, died when she was 9 years old. After her mother died, apparently she was a very difficult child, understandably, and went through a lot of governesses. Then Paula Lindbergh came into her life. She was a very talented opera singer, very well known, and she became Charlotte's stepmother. She introduced a world of music and art into her life that I think you really see throughout all of these works. She called her Paulinka Bing Bong, which translates to ding dong, and it was actually a popular refrain in Yiddish folk songs. It's also from the chorus in Mahler's Third Symphony. So again, that's just one example of the musical references that she has in her work. If you look at the lower left, Alfred Wolfson was her stepmother's voice teacher. He was a very complex and an influential person in Charlotte's life. He had strong theories about how you could live life through art. And she was quite infatuated with him. She went to art school in Berlin until she was about 21, and then she had to escape to the south of France to be with her grandparents. They were in hiding and being kept safe by an American woman named Ottilie Moore, who was also sheltering several Jewish children. While she was there, her grandmother went into a deep depression and eventually took her own life. That's when her grandfather then told her that 5 of her direct relatives, including her mother and her mother's sister, also named Charlotte, had died by suicide. The text that she uses to describe her grandfather's tone and words is very factual and non-emotional, and you'll see this a lot through her work. But she had to be in shock and wondering if that would also be her fate. She wrote then that she was, quote, facing the question of whether to commit suicide or to undertake something insanely extraordinary. I started with the last painting of Charlotte looking out on the Mediterranean, and now I'm going to jump to the very first painting. One of the things that amazes me about her work is her imagination, her ability to visualize a scene that she hadn't experienced in real life. And here she is recreating the scene in which her Aunt Charlotte dies by suicide. You can see her aunt in the upper left corner. She's 17 years old, 1913. She's coming down the staircase of her parents' apartment building. Her arms, for some reason, are tightly wound across her stomach. And she makes this slow journey up and down the sidewalks. It's late at night. You can see just a couple of lights on in the windows. And this slow journey was 6 miles until she reached the river. And that is where she drowns herself. The text, you can see Charlotte's text says that Charlotte Nar, her aunt, left her parents' home and threw herself into the water. And again, I find it fascinating that she could be a dispassionate observer of this scene and so many others. She sounds like a reporter. Something else that interested me about Charlotte, she can be very funny and witty and lighthearted as a narrator of her family story. In the scene on the left, her mother, Francie, is with her parents, and they want Francie to get married. And she says, "Stop bothering me with those dolts." And then in the other scene, Charlotte explains, "And she turned up with this one," and there she is dragging her father into the scene. She paints a lot of really happy childhood scenes when her mother was alive, like this one showing her birth. She's got her birth announcement enclosed with this very sweet heart. And then you can see her mother, the incredible tenderness, the gesture throughout the painting with her mother having given birth. And, just the slope of her neck, the way she looks so adoringly at her daughter. And then down to the lower left, where the nurse is just not happy at all that she can't get a hold of the carriage or push that baby. Something else that I really love about her painting is that she uses only 3 primary colors, red, yellow, and blue. And she mixes them to get this beautiful range of tones and values. Her work has been compared a lot to expressionist artists like Max Beckmann, Chagall, Van Gogh, Egon Schiele, to name a few. And it really does fit because the expressionist art movement emphasizes showing your subjective emotions and your inner experiences over realism. I think this painting is just a great example of that and her beautiful color blending. Sometimes the work has a very lyrical quality and sometimes it's almost like comic strip art. I love this one. Here she is in the mountains. Everyone is gay and happy and singing. The train is coming with them. The train is going. They're on horseback. They're in the water. They're climbing the mountain. And there is just a lot going on there, and you find it a lot in her work. Out of several hundred paintings, it was impossible to select just a handful to share with you tonight. So I tried not to overthink it, but I pulled this one in. I liked it because she's showing herself as being very cheeky. She's trying to bolt from the scene, but her mother has this very gentle touch as she reaches out to grab her. Now, this is an example of the tissue overlay on a piece of art. The tissue has the text and then musical references. So you would lift that up and then you would see the art underneath. In this scene, her mother, Francisca, is holding Charlotte very tenderly in bed, and she's telling her that in heaven, everything is much more beautiful than here on earth. And when your mommy has turned into a little angel, she'll come down and bring her little lambkin. She'll bring a letter telling her what it's like in heaven. Charlotte agrees that it would be beautiful, but she wants her mother not to forget to bring her the letter, to bring it to the open window and to tell her what it is like up there in heaven. From that very touching scene, it's also foreboding. She then paints this very dramatic image of her mother's suicide. She has jumped out the window of the 3rd floor of their apartment. And somehow Charlotte is able to recreate this with these incredible brush strokes and emotion. Again, here she is like a reporter. She's describing her mother standing at the window, yearning and dreaming. And then on the right, she paints the empty window and says now she no longer stands there. Ah, me, in a different place, she now abides. So her mother has died, she's 9 years old, and 15 years later, she's able to capture the restlessness and confusion that she must have felt, pacing back and forth and just waiting for that letter to arrive from heaven on the windowsill. Charlotte was pretty spunky. Here she's being told by her art teacher that she has no talent. And she turns around and just calls her a stupid old cow. Again, oops, don't know what happened there. Again, the juxtaposition of different images can be alarming. This painting is one from the Prelude. She's got to be terrified about what's going on around her, but she doesn't become paralyzed by it. She paints the Nazis as one solid, intimidating, marching form, and then sarcastically describes the swastika as a bright symbol of hope and paints it backwards. I think this really speaks to her resilience, another quality that I very much admire. She confronts real traumas and works through them with some very dramatic scenes in her art. In her 1994 biography, Mary Feldsteiner said that Charlotte Salomon had created, quote, the most innovative record we have from the midst of the Holocaust, a visual path through those dark times, end quote. But many people also say that apart from a handful of images of the Third Reich, Charlotte Salomon's message is as much or even more about love and, of course, death, creativity, her family, philosophy, and music. It has obviously interested art historians, Jewish historians, filmmakers, writers, choreographers, and feminist scholars, particularly exploring those themes of self-destruction and resilience. I'd like to show you these 3 paintings and share some information that came to light 10 years ago. In these scenes, Charlotte and her grandfather have been released from an internment camp, and they've spent the last few days in a railway car crammed with thousands of people. Everyone is exhausted. They need a place to sleep. Her grandfather says, I don't understand you. What's wrong with sharing a bed with me when there's nothing else available? I'm in favor of what's natural. Charlotte says, don't torment me. You know that I know exactly what I have to do. She says, I'd rather have 10 more nights like this in the crowded train than a single one alone with him. When they reach a place to sleep, Charlotte asks the innkeeper, dear madame, would it be possible that I sleep elsewhere? I cannot sleep next to my grandfather. These are loaded statements, but I'm not aware of these paintings causing any undue speculation or interpretation, even in Mary Feldsteiner's biography of so long ago. But it turns out that when Charlotte gave the paintings to the local friend, the package included a 35-page letter that she addressed to her friend Wolfson. Some of the letter was redacted, had been redacted by her parents when they donated all of the artwork to the Jewish Historical Museum in Amsterdam. They left out what appears to be a shocking confession that was only revealed 10 years ago. Charlotte wrote that she had poisoned her grandfather, creating an ink portrait of him as he died. I knew where the poison was, she stated. It is acting as I write. Perhaps he is already dead now. Forgive me. In 2015, this obviously caused a flurry of articles and interpretations, including one by the New Yorker, titled The Obsessive Art and Great Confession of Charlotte Salomon. And that does not question whether her confession was true. It takes it as truth. So with further reading, I came across Mary Feldsteiner's comment about this confession, and she advises caution in interpreting it that way. She says there's no evidence, and you have to consider the possibility of the work blending fact and fiction, which it has done all along. She also notes that Salomon's work, while it's very intimate, is also detached and ironic, as you've seen, and that further complicates really understanding her intentions. So this brings us back to the beginning. Was Charlotte Salomon's confession life or theater? What if Charlotte Salomon had lived? I think that she would have produced an immense body of beautiful and meaningful and striking art. And I would have known her name 25 years ago when I went to that exhibit we would all know her name. I hope that by sharing just a very tiny bit of her story, I've been able to capture some of the reasons that she and her art touched me so long ago and stayed with me. And I hope that you'll be inspired to view this epic story and continue this conversation. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Susan. So our next presenter is Sandi Clark. Sandi is a strong community supporter and volunteers for various New Hampshire-based nonprofits, including serving as president for the Seacoast African American Cultural Center. She's on the executive committee for the Seacoast NWACP. She collaborates with the Black Heritage Trail of New Hampshire, as well as with the Green Acre Baha'i of Elliott, Maine, and the BIPOC Festival. She is also a deaconess and a missionary at North Star AME Zion Church. If she's not on a committee, you'll see her in the audience supporting the Seacoast community any way she can. When she is not in the audience, she's doing her first love performing on stage through her theater production, Jukwa Mazoa. Let's welcome Sandi.
Fanny Lou Hamer. She was born October 1917 and passed away in March of 1977. Fanny was a civil rights activist, voting and women's rights activist, community organizer, and vice chair of the Freedom Democratic Party. She was born Fanny Lou Townsend in Montgomery County, Mississippi. In 1962, she made a life-changing decision to attend a protest meeting. She met several civil rights activists there who encouraged Blacks to register to vote, and soon she became active in helping. In 1964, she helped found the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party. Her home was in Louisville, Mississippi, located in the Black Belt of Mississippi, known as the Delta area. Fanny Lou Hamer was the youngest of 20 children. When I look at that, I think maybe she's the baby, but she was the youngest of 20. She began working in the fields with her parents at the age of 6. And around the age of 12, Fanny Lou dropped out of school in order to work full-time and help her family. She married in 1944 to Perry Pap Hamer and continued to work as a sharecropper on a cotton plantation near Woolville, Mississippi. Fanny Lou Hamer was forced away from the plantation because I have no volume.
It was the 31st of August of 1962. The 18th of August from the county court in Illinois. He was living in Illinois by police. They all got 2 hours here. Take the medical practice. He was held by he continued on and rather my husband came. I said, he said, you don't know. And I said,
I wouldn't go back and withdraw my literacy test after I had tried to take it. I wouldn't go back, and I had to leave. My husband was forced to stay on this plantation until after the harvest season was over, and the man we had worked for had taken the car, and most of the things that we had was stolen. I had been in jail and I had been beaten. I had been to a voter registration workshop, just trying and learning to teach us how. Just to teach us how to pass the literacy test. And it was giving us enough training. We could tell. We could teach others how to pass the literacy test. So I'm just going to share with you a few of the asinine literacy tests. This particular literacy test comes from the state of Louisiana. This test is to be given to anyone who could not prove that they had a 5th grade education. The instructions were, do what you are told to do in each statement, nothing more, nothing less. Be careful because one wrong answer denotes failure of the test. P.S. You have 10 minutes to complete it. One of the questions, how many jelly beans are in front of you? Another one, how many windows are in the White House? At the top, one there says, draw a line through the number of this letter of this sentence. Huh? Draw a line under the last word in this line. Down further, it has one that says, draw a line from circle to circle. So draw it from circle 2 to circle 5. That will pass below circle 2 and above circle 4. You got that? And they go on and on. This one, in the space below, write the word noise backwards and place a dot over what would be its second letter should it have been written forward. So just to give you a little example of some of these, this last one with the diagrams on it, number 25 says, write down on the line provided what you read in the triangle below. The triangle says Paris in the spring. Now the instructions are, in the third square below, write the second letter of the fourth word. These were the literacy tests that African Americans had to take in order to earn the right to vote. So we had attended a workshop from the 3rd of June through the 8th. And then we got on the Continental Trailways bus to come back to Mississippi. And we got back to Winona, Mississippi. I would say it was about 10:30 that Sunday morning. On our way back to Greenwood, we had to get about 25 miles of the voter registration headquarters, and the bus stopped in Winona at the bus terminal. Well, 4 people got off the bus to use the restaurant to get food, and 2 others got off to use the washroom. Well, I was still on the bus. When I looked through the glass, I saw people rushing out. And one of the girls that had gone into the washroom, she just got back on the bus. And I stepped off the bus to see what had happened. Well, Miss Ponder told me that a state highway patrolman and a chief of police on the inside began tapping them on the shoulder with billy clubs and ordered them to get out. I said, well, this is Mississippi. So I got back on the bus. As soon as I was seated, I saw they put the 5 people that got off the bus. But now they wasn't over 6 feet from the bus, and they began to put them in the highway patrol cars. I stepped off the bus again because I was holding one of the ladies' irons that they was arresting. And she said, get back on the bus, Mrs. Hamer. And then I heard somebody say, get that one over there. Get back on the bus, Mrs. Hamer. And he kicked me. On June 9th, 1963, Fanny Lou Hamer and other civil rights activists were arrested in Winona, Mississippi, while returning from a voter education workshop in South Carolina. Mrs. Hamer and the other activists had been traveling in the white section of the Greyhound bus, despite threats from the driver that he planned to notify local police at the next stop. When the bus arrived at the Winona bus stop, some of the activists attempted to eat at Stately's Cafe, but was refused service. Mrs. Hamer, who had stayed on the bus, soon saw police officers arresting some of the activists. She got off the bus and she was seized by a white police officer who began kicking her and arrested her. In 1964, while testifying at the Democratic National Convention to urge party bosses to seat a group of Black Mississippi voters as delegates, Mrs. Hamer recalls the abuse she endured that night at the county jail. It wasn't too long before these 3 white men came to my cell. One of these men was a state highway patrolman, and he asked me where I was from. I told him Ruleville. And he said, I'm gonna go check on this. They left my cell, and it wasn't too long before they came back. He said, you're right, you are from Ruleville. And of course, he used a curse word. And he said, we're gonna make you regret being alive. The white officers then forced 2 African-American prisoners, think about it, to brutally beat Miss Hamer with loaded blackjacks. She was nearly killed. As Mrs. Hamer regained consciousness, she overheard one of the white officers propose, we could put them SOBs in the Big Black River and nobody would ever miss them. Mrs. Hamer suffered from long life injuries following her attack, including permanent kidney damage. Lawyers with the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC, filed suit against the Winona police who brutalized the activists, but an all-white jury acquitted them. Despite the trauma she experienced, Fanny Lou Hamer returned to Mississippi to continue organizing and remained active in the civil rights causes until her death. Fanny Lou Hamer's story stands out to me for so many reasons, but one in particular, I had the pleasure of playing her in a local production called All the Way, the Lyndon B. Johnson story. The plot, as everybody knows in this room, Lyndon B. Johnson becomes president of the United States after the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. As soon as Johnson enters the White House, one of his first tasks is that he has to pass the Civil Rights Act. Fanny Lou Hamer's historical moment was at that Democratic convention in 1964, when she was testifying, now which President Johnson did not want her to talk. As I mentioned before, Mrs. Hamer was raised in the cotton fields of Mississippi. She was a sharecropper. She joined the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee and helped organize Freedom Summer. With Mississippi conducting white-only primaries, activists formed the racially integrated Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party to confront leading Democrats on the national stage. If the Freedom Democratic Party is not seated now, I question America, Hamer told the Credentials Committee. Is this America, the land of the free and the home of the brave, where you have to sleep with your telephone on the hooks because our lives be threatened daily because we want to live as decent human beings in America? President Johnson hastily called a news conference right during her speech. He did this to divert attention from the divisions that could alienate white voters in the South. TV cameras they cut away. But later that night, networks showed her speech. Her speech was challenging the seating Mississippi all-white delegation to the 1964 National Democratic Convention. All of this is on account we want to register to become first-class citizens, Fanny said to the committee. Fanny Lou Hamer was a powerful voice for civil and voting rights movements. And I know there's a few of you out there that remember the atmosphere of the 1960s. Fanny Lou Hamer had been beaten, threatened, because she chose to educate Black folks on how to vote. One of the many beatings caused her to have stomach pain. She suffered kidney damage, a blood clot behind her eye, and a permanent limp. In 1961, Fanny Lou Hamer received a hysterectomy by a white doctor without her consent. He was supposed to be removing a uterine tumor. This forced sterilization of Black women was a way to reduce the Black population. It was called a Mississippi appendectomy. There's more to my story about Mrs. Fanny Lou Hamer to be continued. My plan actually is to create a presentation, a one-woman presentation about her story. If I fall, I'll fall 5 feet 4 inches forward in the fight for freedom. I'm not backing off. Thank you. Thank you for listening to the story, her story, what Fanny Lou Hamer had to say. And before you ask me some questions, I want to give you a couple to think about and or answer. Do you know what Freedom Summer was? The other one, do you know of any other terms like a Mississippi appendectomy? Does anybody know? Unfortunately, I do. It was called the husband stitch.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So our final presenter is Priscilla French. She's the founding artistic director of Portsmouth Pro Musica, celebrating her 40th season. She will be presenting on her second great aunt, Blanche Ames Ames, suffragist, political activist, inventor, artist, and writer, a true Renaissance woman. Priscilla?
Thank you, Valerie, and thank you all for coming out tonight. I am so inspired by these previous two stories. I'm going to be presenting about someone very different. Blanche Ames Ames. What a combination of skills for a 19th century woman. First, some family background on the 6 children of Blanche Butler Ames and Adelbert Ames. Raised in Lowell, Massachusetts, Blanche, on the far left, was the younger sister of my great-grandmother, Edith Ames Stevens, up there on the right. All children were college educated. Blanche graduated with a BA in art history and a diploma in studio art from Smith College, class of 1899, where she was president of her class. Here is a thumbnail sketch on her 3 major ancestors, all of whom were reform-minded. Her mother, Blanche Butler Ames, was the daughter of Civil War General Benjamin F. Butler and actress Sarah Hildreth. While a Victorian woman with strong convictions, Blanche's mother, also Blanche, was free-spirited and remained very close with her 4 daughters, whom she raised to be strong and stoic, drawing on their inner strength. Her marriage to Adelbert Ames in 1870 was predicated on striking the word obey from their vows. A strong influence on young Blanche. She posed the question to her daughter, will women ever have the same rights as men? Blanche's father was also a Union general, Adelbert Ames, who distinguished himself by winning the Congressional Medal of Honor at the First Battle of Bull Run in 1861 and later served at Gettysburg. At the end of the Civil War, Ames became governor of Mississippi during Reconstruction, a very dark period in our country's history. General Butler, Blanche's grandfather, not an especially handsome guy with his slanted eye and 5'4" stature, had a multifaceted career as lawyer turned mill owner turned politician, who eventually became governor of Massachusetts in the 1880s. Born in Deerfield, New Hampshire, he was raised in Lowell, where his mother ran a boarding house for New Hampshire farm girls who worked in the textile mills. Butler favored the 8-hour day for young girls and improved working conditions in the industrial city. Although a controversial figure in American history, he is perhaps best remembered for issuing the Contraband of War Edict in 1861. As commander of Fort Monroe in Virginia, he defied the Fugitive Slave Act, refusing to return escaped enslaved persons to the enemy, an act which led to the Emancipation Proclamation. General Butler was one of the few Union generals to employ African-American troops in the battlefield, and he created a Tiffany Medal to honor their service. Blanche's credo. I'll just read a few of these. I believe in the motherhood of God. I believe in the sacredness of the human body, this transient dwelling place of a living soul. And so I deem it the duty of every man and woman to keep his or her body beautiful through right thinking and right living. I believe in salvation through economic, social, and spiritual freedom. I believe there is no devil but fear. I believe no one can harm you but yourself. I believe in the paradox of success through failure. I believe in the purifying process of sorrow, and I believe that death is a manifestation of life. I believe there is no better preparation for a life to come than this. Do your work as well as you can and be kind. Blanche met Oakes Ames, no relation, another Ames family, while a student at Smith College, by which time she was already a confirmed suffragist. She had to represent the anti-suffrage position in a history class debate and even delivered a letter to President McKinley at graduation about suffrage. Oakes Ames, a professor of botany at Harvard, sent her orchids, art books, and eventually gave her a microscope when they were engaged, thus establishing an extraordinary lifelong partnership, the term Oakes used in place of marriage. Blanche struggled with the traditional female sphere of marriage and motherhood and didn't conform to current gender roles of deferring to husbands as decision makers. Luckily, he didn't either. No rings were exchanged during the marriage ceremony. Quote, "To be happy, really happy, we must hold strongly to the belief in equality and cultivate intensively that mutual ground," unquote, from Oakes Ames. They had 4 children raised in northeastern Mass at their home, Borderland, which today is a public site with the Massachusetts Department of Conservation and Recreation, and for which Blanche was the architect. Orchids. Blanche's husband, Oakes Ames, was a shy and retiring academic. He discovered over 1,000 new species of orchids from all over the world. His seminal scholarly work was compiled into a 7-volume treatise, Orchidaceae. I had to look that up on Google. Blanche created all the drawings. She became the foremost botanical illustrator of her day. And several authors feel that her scientific study of orchids is an accomplishment equal to all of her work for women's rights. So here you can see her amazingly detailed drawings with cross sections and all kinds of parts. Turning now to women's suffrage and political cartoons. Historian Barbara Berenson calls the suffrage movement, quote, "one of the most significant and wide-ranging moments of political mobilization in all of American history," unquote. Cartoons were used to change culture and attitudes during the Great Divide between suffragists and anti-suffragists. Massachusetts had a staunch anti-suffrage presence. Men had to vote to give women the right to vote. Imagine that. In 1915, 500,000 people marched in a victory parade in Boston when it was still state-by-state ratification. Blanche drew 8 suffrage cartoons as art director of the Woman's Journal, which were published in 1915 when Massachusetts held an amendment referendum. The referendum was defeated with 35% men voting yes and 64% of men voting no. Of course, by August 1920, 36 states had ratified the 19th Amendment, but this was only a partial victory as African-American women had to march behind white women. There are 4 cartoons on your screen. On the far left, "Meanwhile They Drown," you see a well-dressed man and woman, both representing anti-suffrage, and that's President Taft holding a life raft called "Votes for Women. When all women want it, I will throw it to them." And the other woman says, "We don't need it." And down below is disease, sweatshop, filth, and something else, which I can't read. On the right is 2 pedestals. Without the vote, women will be seated on precariously balanced ground. So that's the society woman on the left with her frou-frou dogs, demonstrating ignorance and idleness. But with the vote, women on the right will stand solidly on stable ground and can still attend to children and domestic responsibilities. The next rung, just as woman is about to reach the next rung on the vote, she's halted by two demons, injustice and prejudice. But once she gets the vote, she can continue towards true democracy. Women's suffrage flowers map, which showing states that granted suffrage to women in mid-1915 prior to the Massachusetts suffrage amendment. The cartoon images spoke to ordinary women. Blanche had absolute faith in women. Birth control. After 1915, Blanche switched her focus to birth control and reproductive rights. She co-founded the Birth Control League of Massachusetts with Margaret Perriman Welch in 1916 and served as president for 19 years. It was imperative for women to control their lives and learn about contraceptives. Otherwise, they could not be free and equal. The distribution of contraceptive information was illegal in Massachusetts. Well, Blanche was going to do something about that. At a large rally on Commonwealth Avenue, she marched with a wooden penis that she had carved in order to demonstrate how to apply a condom. She was arrested by the police, only for them to find out that she was both the granddaughter of a former governor and daughter-in-law of a former governor. What a badass. Blanche had been inspired by Margaret Sanger's 1916 speech in Boston of how Sanger's mother had died at age 50, after 11 children. However, it turned out that Sanger's focus on contraception for poor women opened her to accusations of eugenics. Sanger also thought doctors and hospitals should have control over contraception. Blanche eventually resigned from the Birth Control League of Massachusetts and became active with the New England Hospital for Women and Children. She believed that women should have female doctors and went on decades later in the 1950s to spearhead a campaign to save that hospital, which today is the Dimmock Community Health Center in Roxbury. Fast forward to the 1960s and profiles in courage. But first, back to the South in the 1870s post-Civil War. Adelbert Ames had become military governor, senator, and finally Republican governor in Mississippi during Reconstruction. The Mississippi Plan of 1874 to 1875 was part of a white insurgency developed by white Southern Democrats to crush Black voting after the newly enacted 14th and 15th Amendments of 1868 and 1870. Governor Ames requested federal troops from President Ulysses Grant to quell the violence, and he was vilified for extending rights to freed slaves. Blanche's mother was afraid of assassination. In his 1963 book, Profiles in Courage, Senator John F. Kennedy praised the Mississippi Plan, espoused by Democratic Senator Lamar, and called Adelbert Ames, quote unquote, an arrogant carpetbagger from Maine. In fact, Ames had the same mission as Kennedy, to bring justice to African American citizens, restore public education, and rebuild the state from the destruction of the Civil War. Infuriated, Blanche wrote to JFK requesting a second edition of the book, but he refused. She then, at age 85, was inspired to undertake a defense of her father and wrote a 625-page book complete with maps and illustrations. Adelbert Ames, 1835 to 1933, Broken Oaths and Reconstruction in Mississippi. Adelbert Ames, by the way, was the last surviving full-rank general of the Civil War. He died at age 97. Her legacy. I admire her tenacity and drive, her independent marriage, her being mobilized to action and change as a young woman, a flamboyant, wild, modern woman. As my dad once said, you don't mess with Aunt Blanche. A tireless advocate for women's rights, she would be marching today to save our democracy.
Yes.
She was an underrated figure in American women's history who used her privilege for the greater good. And to think that President Trump now wants to eliminate the documentation of women in history. One of Blanche's granddaughters remembers her advice: never give up, always go forward. In 2020, the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment, a documentary was made of Blanche's life and work called Borderland, which you can find on the internet. It ends with Kamala Harris's voice. And finally, when she died in 1969, her New York Times obituary was titled Mrs. Oakes Ames, Botanist, Widow. Thank you.
Well, thank you, everybody. I just want to do some closing words because I'm a Unitarian. We always have opening and closing words. So as women, we are creatives, nurturers, lovers, movers, and game changers. We hold the power to birth ideas, to heal, to inspire, and to transform the world around us. Every step we take is a statement of our resilience, creativity, and deep connection to the rhythm of life. This dance is an invitation to honor the sacred power that flows through us and celebrate the fierce, loving energy that we bring to everything that we do. Thank you so much for coming and celebrating Women's History tonight with us.